It's pretty epic. StreamYard is blaming my browser for failing to play the video. Classic, putting the blame on somebody else. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Friday Night Leisure. Alberto canceled on me today. Alberto had too many, busy doing something else. I mean, of course, he has his family and all that kind of stuff. He's probably hanging out with them, which is good. But I was like, okay, Alberto canceled on me, and I can't do tomorrow because Saturday's really busy for me. I was like, who do I like to drink with? Who do I like to hang out with? His Excellency.
Oh dear. Well, I must say, the live streams, I might as well get some sort of sponsorship from Guinness, because typically, on my Tuesdays, and then tonight I figured I had to do the same. I enjoy a pint of Guinness.
Alberto, if you're watching this.
Yeah, it was funny. The StreamYard, there was a little bit of an echo and stuff too. So we had a little bit of a technical thing, and I saw that we sort of flashed in between in the intro there too. So that was kind of funny, but I'm honored to be the guest Alberto this week. And yeah, looking forward to what folks want to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, there's almost like nothing to talk about these days. I mean, if you watch the news, it's like, what's going on? Like, there's nothing.
Heaven forbid we be bored.
This is Friday Night Leisure, where we see you in the chat and we answer any of your questions and talk about whatever you want to talk about. Here tonight, you're lucky enough to have a traditionalist bishop live with us to ask any question you want. Anything from what's it feel like to being a bishop, to have you ever excommunicated anybody, to anything that bishops do on a daily. Anything. Tina, hello. Thanks for joining us tonight on Friday Night Leisure.
Hello, Tina.
Mark, where's Amy? Trying to find out where Amy is. All right, now we're just waiting for a few people to log in as usual. Everyone's usually a minute or two late, which is why we started a minute or two early, so the algorithm helps out our algorithm.
Right.
But Your Excellency, I mean, in one sense, maybe many people don't really know much about who you are, what you run, what you do, what you're in charge of, what kind of your organization and your parish just kind of do. Why don't you give us a little introduction about yourself?
Sure. So basically, I was a seminarian in the Novus Ordo many, many years ago. And when I say, it's funny when I talk to folks like Father Martin, I feel like I'm his age, but I'm actually went fast. I'm close to his mom's age. But I went to seminary in the 90s under John Paul II, time of John Paul II, and I went to a conservative seminary that was actually pretty good in most respects. About 96 students, and my class had like 37, and we were known as the medieval year. That was what the faculty called us, because we had a whole bunch of conservatives and traditional friendly seminarians. And it was at that time, my second year there, that I met Father John Melnick. And we were all excited because he worked for Ecclesia Dei at the Congregation of Doctrine of Faith. So it was really quite an honor to have such a person there with all this background and experience and the like. And he was an Augustinian monk. And, that's actually, I mentioned that part of the story because that's the connection between Father Martin and I. We share a formator, we share a spiritual director, we share a friend in the late Father John. And so he's really the reason why we sort of ended up where we are, to make the long story short. But in summary, basically, we are a portion of the Catholic Church that is committed to restoring tradition both in the ecclesial realm and the secular realm. And I mean, it's a relatively small group across from, if you look at traditionalists in general, we're loud on Twitter and YouTube and the like. But when you think about it, of all the many Catholics that exist in the world, there's probably only a couple 100,000 traditionalists in the whole world. So it's a, what are the numbers on that, Father? Do you know?
I have no idea, but I think the SSPX claim to have around 500,000 lay people that they serve across the world.
Well, that's pretty incredible. But I mean, even so, that's a fraction of because I'm pretty sure it's over a billion Catholics, right? Must be even more.
Exactly. And there's 7 billion people in the world. So
Yeah, so it's got to be more than that. It's probably what 2 billion Catholics then or whatever. So that actually we should ask Grok. But anyway, tradition, the group of, so what do we mean when we say, what do you mean by a traditional Catholic bishop? So what we mean by that is that the emphasis when you're a traditional is on the faith versus the institution. So our Lord founded a church and he gave us a faith, and so the church is, of course, an institution that's visible, as well as the mystical aspect of it. It has its holy component and it has its human component, which of course it can fail. And basically with the changes since the Enlightenment, since the Protestant Revolution, but then since the Enlightenment, there has been sort of a redefinition, a redefining, a process over centuries of redefining what Christianity is. And it's sort of like the analogy of a slowly cooked lobster. In other words, a lobster being a cold-blooded animal will, if you cook it slowly, it doesn't realize it's dead until it's, it doesn't even know it's in danger until it's dead. So that's kind of what's happened to Christianity. It's not just a Catholic problem, but it's the Catholics are the easiest way we can point to where sort of the rupture in teaching comes. But even if we have the odd Protestant watching, I would say to you the same thing I say to Catholics: read old books. So if you read something of a theological or something spiritual in nature from the 1920s, you'll see what I'm getting at. There's a rupture in belief on a whole bunch of fronts. So basically, a traditional movement in varying degrees of relationship with the visible organization. We all share a commitment to restoring the old faith of our great-grandparents and so forth, and the liturgy of said thing. So the moral praxis, the theology, and the way we celebrate Holy Mass and the other sacraments. And so that's what it is. And where the friction comes between the various groups really is how we understand the Petron office and how we understand the current crisis in the church, and how do we get out of this mess. So there's a diversity of opinion on that, but I would say if you were to ask me, well, what's the difference between a traditionalist and a non-traditionalist Catholic? A traditionalist Catholic does not believe core elements expressed in the doctrinal councils of the church up until Vatican I, which was the late 1800s. Those things cannot be changed or innovated if they're of de fide aspect, if they're part of the deposit of the faith. And our modern Christian counterparts would say, no, you guys aren't listening to the Holy Spirit. And basically our answer to that is, well, I don't know what spirit you're listening to, but we don't think it's the Holy Spirit. So I don't know if that's a good summary, but if you want to fill anything in, because I like to rabbit hole and ramble.
Yeah, well, I mean, what you did mention a little bit of your background with Father John and going through seminary, and I mean, it's a crazy. I mean, both you and I had. It really was divine providence working, especially through Father John, to wind up in this place that is just been nothing but a blessing to, I guess, to all of us. Where we've been giving the small little seed, we pour a little water on it, and it's beginning to blossom and grow. And it's great to see. It's great to have places where, in one sense, a lot of people don't know about, so they don't come with a lot of the. I'm not trying to bash on trads here a little bit, but without some of the baggage, in the sense of like, we all see online, and maybe we've all experienced some people that just want to be traditionalists because they want to look smart, they want to be right, they want to look down on other people, maybe those sorts of things. But here we're so focused on helping our parishioners grow in holiness, and everybody comes from someplace, right? Everybody comes from with some sort of past or whatever, but they're all here for the right reason. They're all here for the right reason, which is to get closer to God, and tradition is a means to an end rather than an end in and of itself. So I mean, from the parishioners to the clergy here in Caer-Glow, I've been nothing but edified.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's not uncommon. I've talked to a number of our clergy that have said, I didn't even know about you guys, and so when I found you, it was amazing. So, and I had that same feeling too. And so, but I mean, God allows us to go through these desert periods so that we can, I guess, appreciate the mission at hand. So I was very, very, I love my time in the Novus Ordo. I didn't know what I didn't know. And then when I saw some cracks, I mean, there was little things like the just liturgical abuses, invalid matter with the Mass, the way that communion was handed out. The straw for me really was, the straw for me was when they removed our Lord from a church that I was going to daily mass, and they basically deleted the tabernacle and they put a bandstand up behind the priest. And I just said enough. I was reading the parable of the talents, and that's a scary parable if you read it, because there's that. So for those who aren't familiar, the parable is about the 3 servants, each given entrusted with a different amount of money, which coincidentally, and it's awesome that it's this coincidence, the name for the value of money also, can apply to an attribute, a talent. And so the servant that buries his talent in the soil, scared of what the master will find when he comes back, but knowing he will demand a return, and still he buries the talent in the soil, and for safety, for his comfort. The master comes back and hurls that servant out where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, because it was not a return with that talent. And so I realized I was that servant, a number of years ago, 15 years ago, whatever. And I realized I have this theological education, and basically was not in the fight. I was letting other people do the fight, because I wanted my comfort. I wanted my reverent Novus Ordo Mass, and I just wanted to say my prayers, go to mass, and then and that's all I had to worry about. And God had another plan. And when I finally had enough, because you wonder, like, we dismissed for years some of this crazy stuff as just being, just one wing nut, it's just this. But then you become aware that there's a whole program to destroy the church from the inside. And I realized, okay, now that I'm aware of this, I'm accountable to God to bear return with that knowledge that I had. So back, those years, I decided I was going to go move. I was in Oregon at the time, and I was going to move to either be near the Society of Pius X or Fraternity St. Peter. And I didn't get involved in the crazy wars like between them. I've never been a fan of trads attacking trads, because, this isn't the time or place for it. A future Catholic Peter will sort out the differences between us.
Speaking of which, we have one question in the chat from, yes, we're getting to it just right now, Scottish Patriot. Question: what are your thoughts on Congregation of Mary Immaculate Queen, CMRI, Roman Catholic Institute with Bishop Sanborn, and other Sedevacantists groups? Any thoughts on being in communion with them? I'll shoot this over to you, Your Excellency, but I just want to say real quickly that they don't really seem to be in communion with each other. I mean, they've been working on it in more recent years, but I mean, Bishop Sanborn had a falling out with Bishop Dolan, and Bishop Dolan, of course, received his consecration from Bishop Pervenutis of the CMRIs. There's huge, debates between the totalist position and the Sede Provisionist position, and all these sorts of things. I think, me personally, I would love to work with them if they're in an area of Florida or any other part of the country where I know someone that needs the sacraments. I'd love to just call them up and say, hey, what do you tend to this person that I know? And they'd be like, yeah, sure. And they go anoint them or whatever that they need. I'd love to recommend people to the chat. We do that all the time, actually, only to, have our end of the bargain kind of burned. People say, oh, they're old Catholics. They're not Catholic. They're not traditional, all this kind of stuff. So we get that all the time. I think we just recommended, one of our priests recommended somebody he knows in a chapel in Texas, affiliated with Bishop McGuire. And whenever these people approached the priest, told them that our priest in our organization wasn't Catholic. So it's very difficult, when all these other traditionalist clergy, Sedevacantist clergy, just kind of shoot from the hip, just kind of want to be the monopoly. They want to monopolize tradition and just be the only group, the only sheriff in town, so to speak. Your Excellency, what do you think?
Yeah, I 100% agree. So our position is that we're friends of anyone who promotes the restoration of the old faith. And that's even if that friendship is not reciprocated. So here's the problem, is that sometimes this is about benefactors too. You get some of the people that are well-heeled and funding these organizations. They have strong opinions, and there can be a competition amongst various traditional groups over benefactors. I've seen it happen that, there's a whole bunch of communities that want the traditional mass, but a group will set up a chapel right beside the other guy, right? Which is just ridiculous. We should be spreading the tradition all over. And so we're open to working with everyone, but we've been burned a couple times where we try to never say anything publicly bad about another traditional group. And we've been burned for it, because what happens is we'll send one of our people over there that's traveling, and then they'll say, oh, well, you're not part of our group, so you're not Catholic. And they don't even bother picking up the phone or phoning one of us or talking to one of us, or to even have sort of a I guess you call it a rule of engagement, right? What can we agree with? What do we disagree with? Because the thing is, I don't mind if people disagree with me or if they don't like me. What I do mind is that they smile to your face and then backstab you or go after your benefactors behind your back. And that's that's not behavior worthy of fellow baptized, and certainly not for traditionals who are trying to restore the old faith. So again, we will gladly work with every group, and we're perfectly okay for someone to say, in fact, we have an arrangement with that, like that in certain cases where, we're not ready to, we share our altars, for example, but that doesn't mean that we're going to prejudge another group. We don't have, first of all, these various groups don't even know one another that well enough to say that in most cases, whether you're Catholic or not. And it also depends on what your definition of that is. And we're clear about our definition: 20 doctrinal councils, excluding all innovation contrary. And when I say the 20 doctrinal councils, I mean up to Vatican I, all the de fide aspect. We're not talking about administrative decrees that sometimes are in councils, but in the de fide aspect, 20 doctrinal councils. Now, that should be a definition that includes sedes, includes Fraternity of St. Peter, includes Society of Pius X, includes the Institute, includes all the various groups, and excludes the ones that don't have the Catholic moral praxis, the ones that don't have the old Mass, and who thinks that doctrine is mutable.
Yeah.
Or dogma is mutable, excuse me.
So Scottish Patriot says, my experiences with SSPX is they like to think they're the only option for sacraments, only valid sedevacantist community. And okay, so this is unique in one sense. It depends on the priest, right? There's different factions, different ideas, different opinions within the society, which is natural. I mean, no, nothing bad about that. But actually, I have to tell a story. I have a friend who has a friend who used to go to a SSPX chapel and moved to the city of my friend, and my friend's friend asked one of the SSPX priests whether they should go to the local indult mass, or actually, would the SSPX priest? He was asking the SSPX priest, would he prefer that he go to the local indult mass or to this Father Martin Navarro? And the SSPX priest said, I don't know who this Father Martin Navarro guy is, but I prefer you to go to him. Which is kind of funny. So it really depends on the priest that you ask. I mean, some are very fixated on the laity and pretending that they're juridically, like actual juridically, not just theologically, but juridically on paper, in law, in full communion with the Roman Pontiff Leo XIV. And so they absolutely insist on that fact. There's others that just prefer that you go to someone who actually teaches the Catholic faith and administers the sacraments correctly. And so for us, we tend towards the latter, in the sense of what does a law mean whenever Father James Martin and Father Mark Rupnik are all listed, spitting all sorts of heresies, doing crazy things, against the Sixth Commandment with nuns. But those who are actually holding the true faith, don't get a place, don't get an altar. Same with the communist bishops in China. They can consecrate bishops all they want without a papal mandate, and Rome just quick forgive. But for the SSPX bishops, no, not the same. And so what does the law mean whenever there's just pure lawlessness by the governors? In one sense, it becomes not null and void, but simply irrelevant. Simply irrelevant. Like, if you have a personal disposition to fixate on law rather than the meaning and purpose of the law, then of course you're going to be have anxiety over what law says on paper. But if you know that law serves a higher purpose, it serves the purpose of justice, and of course justice. There's justice in our legal courts, and then there's that which is supposed to participate in, which is divine justice. The divine law, the eternal law. Human law is supposed to participate in the natural law, divine law and the eternal law. And so our justice has to match that of natural law in the divine law. And when it doesn't, meaning when it contradicts the salvation of souls, when the law is being used for a contrary purpose for which it was made, that's not law. That's just raw power. That's not authority. That's raw power. And so this is the concept that many of us groups operate on, and simply doing God's will. When God gave the apostles authority, he gave it for a purpose, not so that they could lord it over people, but so they could serve the people of God to get to heaven. And that's exactly what Rome today is not doing. I don't know if you want to comment on
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, the thing is that postmodern. Okay, so some of you follow us on Twitter, and one of the things I commonly say is you can serve the true God of Saint Athanasius, or the false one of Teilhard. And Teilhard I refer to as the Teilhard de Chardin, who was a theologian in the 20th century, who basically believed in a changing God and an evolving people that were going to find this omega point of perfection in God. And basically, the postmoderns, not just Catholics, Anglicans, Presbyterians, whatever, are following this Teilhardian God in practice. Maybe not on their paper, but they believe that doctrine is so changeable. I sometimes joke and say, well, spin the wheel and see what they ask us to believe next week, because even the 1990s catechism is too conservative for them. So it's kind of ridiculous. And things like women's ordination comes up, but Canon 19 of the Council of Nicaea, the first ecumenical council outside of the apostles' attendance in the history of the church, definitively settled this question. Yet why is this always up? Why does this keep coming up? And the reason is the devil got very clever. He used bad men essentially to take over a lot of the institutional structures and turn the power of the church against the church's own faith. And so that's what basically we fight against. And we're not alone. We're not the only true Catholics. In fact, there's good Catholics even in the Novus Ordo. They're fighting from within. And so we don't see ourselves as, everybody in the Novus Ordo is bad, but we point to, Fulton Sheen's prediction in 1946 that in these times, true church and ape church would coexist in the same structures. And in Athanasius's time, he was thrown out of the institutional church, and he said, they can have the buildings, we will have the faith. We'll keep the faith. So essentially, we are hopefully a voice of encouragement and hope for people who have fallen in love with the old saints, the old faith, and they realize that where the new one's going is a telos to Antichrist. So a direction that's contrary to the positive faith that we've received. And my final point on that is, again, if you've listened to me or saw my Twitter, I always refer to the same book that Francis, Leo, and Benedict have referred to. It's called Lord of the World by Hugh Benson, published in 1907. It is truly prophetic of how we see two churches, a church that holds to the remnant, holds to the old faith, and a church that's reinventing itself through synodality and through cooperation with globalist power structures.
So Scottish Patriot meant SSPV, which, yes, is a different reality. Yes, they are kind of arrogant. They really do think that they're the only church on the face of the planet, which, okay, let's think about it this way. We all were flabbergasted, appalled, shocked, demoralized whenever the USCCB shut down all the churches in the United States for COVID, right? Now, imagine that on a worldwide scale. And that's what some sedevacantists believe, that Almighty God passively permitted with the promulgation of the Novus Ordo and the Second Vatican Council, that there ceased to be basically valid holy orders all across the world, to where they basically just exist in like one or two places, basically in the United States, and that's it. So here's a question: like, if that is true, why work so hard to provide the sacraments if Almighty God doesn't believe they're that necessary for people in Africa, for people in Asia, for people in Europe? Like, if they can get to heaven without the sacraments, why give up your life to offer them? Especially now that the Novus Ordo is here. So the reality is, for me personally, I believe the Novus Ordo sacraments are valid. However, the teaching that comes with them, the formation of the priests, is largely deficient, that even though they have the grace at their disposal to get to heaven, they're lacking other essential means to actually get there. Other essential means to actually get there. Thus, the valid sacraments need to be paired with the preaching of the true faith. The preaching of the true faith. And this is why we continue to sacrifice our lives, because at the Novus Ordo, you're only getting half the story. You're only getting half the story.
And in some ways, it's kind of scary that the Novus Ordo sacraments are valid from the standpoint of the sacrilege of communion in the hand. So that means our Lord truly is being disrespected. So it's one of these things you have to realize. I used to be Novus Ordo, so did Father Martin. We come from that. And so the thing is it was quite a transition to wake up and realize that, I had intended to be faithful to God, but by compromising with the world without even realizing I was doing it, and sort of there's a process of awakening. Oh my goodness, like when you realize that St. Athanasius or Robert Bellarmine would never recognize modern churches as, they'd be lucky to recognize them as Christian, let alone Catholic. When you realize that, you're like, oh, how did this happen? And then it's fun to blame it on the Protestants, but it's not the Protestants' fault. It's our own baptized men, both lay and ordained, that have walked from the field of battle, the spiritual warfare, that have allowed all this error to be everywhere. And people are just quiet. They just shrug their shoulders, or they accept the square circles necessary for the devil to keep them quiet. People, the devil exposed with the last 60 years, how many people are more concerned about their own spiritual and psychological comfort than they are about living the first commandment, to be like John the Baptist, to endure the ridicule of the world for the service of the truth. And that's why, God love you. Most of our viewers watching this share our conviction that we live in crazy times, and that God has called all of the baptized to listen to his voice and stand against this inversion of the faith, inversion of our Catholic morality, inversion of the teaching of the church held for 2,000 years. Because if these modernists, if these postmoderns are correct, and people like Father Martin and I are wrong, well, and that means that the church has been wrong for nearly 2,000 years. Mm-hmm. And if the church was wrong for 2,000 years, then why would we listen to the authority that claims that it runs that institution now? So I'm not asking you to, jump off the wagon. I'm asking you to ask these questions honestly, because you realize that we're on uncharted ground, and everybody's just trying to be faithful. Well, the sincere among us are just trying to live the first commandment and live a life pleasing to God with his good help. So that's the mission. And I'm excited and encouraged that so many people are waking up to tradition. And I don't care whether you go to Pius X or with Bishop Sanborn or all, these various groups, CMRI, or the like. If the intent is to serve God and to restore the old faith and the Catholic social order, then the differences between the various traditional groups, a future Peter will sort out. And I'm not worried about it. And we're all operating with the best that we can do with the information that we have. And some groups just emphasize, different aspects.
Let's see. Quick shout out to Christine. Good evening, Christine. Quick shout out to Chris. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening.
Mike or Mark, we're still waiting for Amy. Where's Amy? Okay, let's see. Next question. Is it possible the Novus Ordo sacraments are valid but not licit, or perhaps rather licit but not valid? Here's the thing. I think in the 83 code, I have to look up in the 1970 code. In the 83 code, there's a funny canon, which is in a sense very important. I pointed it out to Matt Gaspers, I think, once. It's the fact that if someone holding an office, a cleric holding an office, if he were to become a manifest heretic or an apostate, until he's verbally told so by the competent authority and declared so by the competent authority and removed from that office, obviously he still holds the office in a practical sense. So all of his promulgations, whatever he promulgates, is valid but illicit, which means unlawful. Valid but unlawful. And this is a unique situation because it's valid, in one sense, you don't sin by doing it. But because it's illicit, you don't have to follow it. You don't have to do it if you know it's illicit. So that's the middle ground. There's no competent authority here on earth that can remove the Pope. We can acknowledge that he's a manifest heretic. There's no competent authority for him to actually be removed from the office. And so this is fundamentally actually where I stand in the fact that I don't have the competency to actually remove him from the office. He's there, but maybe everything he says, if he's truly a manifest heretic, the thing that which he promulgates is illicit. And so if Paul VI, for instance, was valid but illicit because he was a manifest heretic, promulgating the new rites, they would be valid but unlawful. And the thing is, if you know it's unlawful, then it's a sin to attend them. It's in a sense a sin to follow it if you know they're unlawful. So you can say I'm erring on the side of caution and not going to Novus Ordo Mass because it was promulgated illicitly, because the Pope who promulgated him was a manifest heretic, and nobody can remove him from office because he's a Pope. And so that's the interesting thing about canon law. And in one sense, the real safety of a position. Like there's something that Bishop Sanborn published called opinionism, which he rejects. He says you have to choose a position, but he doesn't realize that every position is an opinion. So it's like you have to sacrifice your own opinion for an opinion that somebody else holds, and you're supposed to hold his opinion rather than somebody else's opinion. Otherwise, you're an opinionist.
Or he'll say that you're not on.
And so it's crazy. Every position is an opinion, because nothing has been declared a doctrine or a dogmatic fact of something for us to concretely, surely follow when this crisis were to occur. No one predicted this crisis. Which is why you have to treat other trads with charity, even if they don't agree 100% with our explanation of the crisis. So I think it is possible for the Novus Ordo sacraments to be valid but illicit, of course. Illicit but not valid? No, because then you have to be lawfully in possession of complete in the office, which means you can't be a heretic or an apostate. And that's the essence of the crisis, is that those in authority or holding office are all heretics and apostates. Your Excellency, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the ways to look at licety as well is it pleasing to God? So, I mean, there's quite a bit of debate amongst traditional priests, both regular and irregular, about, I guess, the validity of Novus Ordo sacraments. And there's, that's like a 6-episode thing to get right into that. But at the end of the day, it's also, what is more pleasing to God? Is it more pleasing to God to be in communion with Pachamama? Or is it more, is it more displeasing to be in communion with Pachamama, or go to a mass that's not administratively under Leo, but holds the Catholic faith? So that's a question everybody's got to answer. I have a priest friend of mine. He's a Novus Ordo priest that offers the traditional mass, like what you call an indult priest, is sort of the nickname. And that's what he told his people one time when it looked like Francis was going to close his church. And he said, basically, I can't tell you what to do. Everybody's going to have to make up their own mind. They have to, given the information they have, but you have to decide, is Catholic the faith, a faith that was received from our Lord Jesus, a church that he founded? Or was it, or does it matter if they say tomorrow there's 4 persons in the Trinity, or that the Blessed Sacrament is just a symbol, or that you can marry 2 people of the same gender? Like, when they come out with this stuff, like, that's either correct or not. And so what's happened in the postmodern age is people that are anthropologically conservative, okay? So people that would hold to traditional values that were even accepted like in the 70s or earlier, those people are finding themselves very uncomfortable in the synodal church, because the synodal church is essentially a new gospel of recycling and migration. And that has nothing to do with salvation or the cross, and there's exceptions that prove the rule. There's these wonderful, evangelists in this time, Catholic evangelists and apologists. But at the end of the day, they have a square circle. Imagine, I used to evangelize. I was as a seminarian, I worked in chaplaincy with a military unit, and my counterpart was a Baptist minister. And we used to have these great banters back and forth on the Gospel of John and the like. And 2 sincere men brought up in 2 different Catholic, 2 different Christian traditions, agreeing to disagree on certain aspects of the Gospel of John. But the thought occurred to me a while back. I thought, jeepers, if I was successful in converting him to the Catholic faith all those years ago, and then he had to deal with Francis, I mean, he'd be demanding an apology from me, because what is that? right? So, I mean, we essentially what's been going on is that when people have psychological or spiritual, I guess, threat or discomfort, it's very easy to let your eyes glaze over and for you to close your ears. Oh, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. That didn't happen. Oh, yeah, it did happen. And how are we supposed to credibly evangelize and help souls get to heaven if every time, put yourself in a conservative priest's point of view in the Novus Ordo, they can't say what they believe. See, the one thing about our clergy, and I'd say the other trad groups, we all have the same faith. We all have the same God. But you go into a typical synodal diocese, you've got two religions occupying the same buildings. And you can see it even architecturally. In any town that has two parishes, go. You'll see one that's very, has the very traditional stained glass windows and nice altar. And then the other one has banners and the altar on wheels and it's all there. God gives us every piece of information and hint we need to see this battle clearly. But if you're the type of person that's just using the church like a consumer product instead of as a response to the love of God, then you're just going to go where you're comfortable, not where he's calling you to do to help restore the Christian social order.
So in the 1917 Code of Canon Law, it's Canon 2314, Section 1. So 2314, Section 1. So a manifest heretic or apostate incurs late sententiae, an automatic excommunication under Canon 2314, Section 1, without any prior sentence or declaration. Such a person continues in office, which means exercising jurisdiction. Such a person continues in office, exercising jurisdiction, until competent ecclesiastical authority issues a condemnatory or declaratory sentence that effectively removes him. So this is what I'm talking about, is that even though you're a manifest heretic and everybody knows it, you still can exercise jurisdiction until competent authority removes you. And there's no competent authority on earth that can remove a pope. And so that's why that which he promulgates, he's exercising jurisdiction, is valid but illicit because he's a heretic, a manifest heretic, and apostate. So that ultimately is my position, because it's both in the 17 Code, 83 Code, and in one sense, it gives us, I mean, Almighty God promised that the church would always have that which is necessary for the salvation of souls, which means supply jurisdiction, all these matters. And to me, this is at least what makes complete sense. Now, there's a later question on here that I haven't been looking at, but we have to get to other things before that. But yeah, that's why I think these are valid but illicit, is because there's canons in the 17 Code and the 83 Code. Not that I care much for the 83, but the 17 Code at least says that someone who becomes an apostate or heretic while in office still needs a condemnatory declaratory sentence. And until that happens by competent authority, they still exercise jurisdiction. And so for that reason, things can be valid, but still illicit. St. Anthony Padua, Radtra, thanks for joining us. If you oppose the Novus Ordo, you are not my enemy. I mean, I think that's basically what our Lord said, right? If you're not against me, then you're for me, sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, no, we agree.
Mm-hmm. Father Martin, question: would you say then you are more sedeprovisionism than sedevacantist? To be honest, again, a lot of these positions that I hear, I mean, I think they're all in a sense plausible. They're always plausible for a certain perspective, but I think every position ultimately has an Achilles tendon. This is why I don't particularly subscribe to any. But I see that everyone who comes up with a position like sedeprovisionism versus sedevacantism, ultimately their intention is to think according to the mind of the church. They're trying to think according to the mind of the church. So in a sense, there's goodwill in all these opinions. I'm not going to call them positions anymore. I'm just going to call them opinions. There's goodwill in all of these opinions, and so I hold them all pretty plausible. But I also don't want to put myself in a box in a particular opinion per se, because yeah, I mean, sometimes I depending on the day, I see one position more one opinion more plausible than the other. But ultimately, my position, because this isn't an opinion, is that the church exists for the salvation of souls. And so when I wake up every morning, that's what I'm going after. I'm not concerned with converting people to my opinion regarding the matter of the crisis. That's not what I wake up thinking. I wake up, I pray my matins, I do my mental prayer, my lauds, my mental prayer. I'll go offer mass, do my Thanksgiving, and I meet with people to try to save their souls. That's ultimately what I do. The positions, the trad positions, to me, they're like way back there in my list of important things.
And
So what are you?
I'd say they're way above our pay grade too. Like we can have an opinion. We have an educated, all of the various groups, including ourselves, have an educated opinion on this. We do have some more insight than, say, the average layperson. Some lay people are very well informed too. But the thing is that at the end of the day, we have no authority to rule on it. And we make no claim that we're the only Catholics, unlike some groups. Some of these groups that we're talking about here believe that they're it. And if you don't belong to them, then you're not really Catholic. And I think that that is a presumption of an authority they do not have and God did not give them. In the spirit of Acts 5, what we have to do is find the common ground of restoration and leave the civil wars alone, because a future Catholic Peter's got to sort it out. That's it. And if there's no clear Peter because of all the confusion, then we're stuck with the reality we have. So why would you waste energy, messing around with other groups that are supposed to be on your side?
Mm-hmm. Mark asks, unfortunately, how do we drive out homosexuality out of the church?
Flamethrower? Did I say that aloud, Father? Are we going to get demonetized now?
Oh, man.
No, I mean, you look, I have this thing. Some of you are Gen Xers. So again, if you're Gen X or older, there was this thing in the 80s, this silly movie called Police Academy. I had a friend of mine who became a police officer. He loved this show as a kid, and it's just silly. But there's this scene, the cops, every movie, the cops go into this dark room, and then this nasty music comes up and these guys in leather start dancing around. And that's just how I look at the postmodern churches across the various communities. They're all, if they're not heretical or Marxist, they're all homosexual. So, and everybody sort of nudge, wink, wink. They don't care, so it gets disheartening. And how many, those of you who have friends who are seminarians know a lot of people have a very hard time. Like, you just basically, if you're a normal man trying to get through this mess of crazy. And I mean, I had a pretty good seminary, but I have priest friends in the Novus Ordo that have gone through sheer hell over this particular issue just because they wanted to live a chaste life. And then I get flamed. Oh, how dare you say this? You're going to cause scandal. Listen, the scandal is that we haven't cleaned it up, like as a community of baptized, right? So put the sunlight on it and let's sort it out. And God loves the homosexual, but he does not love homosexuality, the practice of it. So it's we're all called to chastity. So it's lived out differently depending on our state of life.
I mean, there's certain things that homosexuals are attracted to, in particular with institutional authority. For instance, a homosexual ultimately is someone with major daddy issues. He doesn't know what a man is. He doesn't feel like a man, and so he has to try to find a man to make him feel like a man. And so institutional authority, the hierarchical structure, having this approval, rising up the status, is largely attractive to that because it replaces what a father should have been to him. A father should look at his son and say, "I'm proud of you. Help him grow, help him become a man, form him to be that man." But a homosexual didn't have that, and so that structure is very attractive. Also, the ability to control others, have subordinates, is very much attractive to them. So, in one sense, just the mere institution is always gonna attract them. Of course, the whole celibacy thing for priests allows them to hide their inclinations, in the sense that they don't have to have a wife, they can hide and be promiscuous. So that doesn't help either. But in many of the reforms of the church, I wrote an article about this on Substacks. One of the consistent aspects of all the reforms throughout the entire church history is priests living in community. And I think because there's diocesan priests are few and far in between these days, that renders something like that impossible, or at least normal parish life impossible, whenever the priest lives 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes away from the parishes that he's serving. So actually, maybe condensing parishes. I mean, I know we dog on it a lot that, you know, dioceses are closing parish after parish after parish, but maybe a better reason to do so is actually so that priests could actually have a common life. There could actually be someone trustworthy in each house to monitor the situation, and for there to be constant fraternal correction. And whenever someone sees something off, somebody says something to somebody, rather than priests living secret lives. So it made me maybe there needs to be another emphasis on a priest living in community in order for the priesthood to have a reform. But that's another thing about a part of the crisis. It's impossible to have a reformation of religious life and priesthood. All the bishops are canceling precisely those who are trying to proceed with a reform. The only reform that's permitted is the new synod on synodality that's going to offer some sort of new criteria for priestly formation. That reform is okay, but if you want to start a traditional community, no.
Absolutely.
I think the last pope was Pope Leo X. I'm just kidding. So we call ourselves Old Roman Catholics to separate ourselves from the Old Catholics, because the Old Catholics, yeah, they're weird, they're funny. Our lineage comes from Arnold Harris Matthews through Utrecht, but ultimately the people that are clergy now in our group, we grew up Novus Ordo, and if you want to put it this way, we hijacked this thing and made it a tried Catholic community. So it's like whatever the history is, no, I don't even know the history of this place in the sense that it's irrelevant. Like I know little bits and pieces, but I was like, no one's here for whatever happened in like the 1700s or whatever. We're just here to keep the faith and offer the sacraments and whatnot. But yeah.
Yeah, basically it's de facto become a line more than like an apostolic line. So all of the clergy that exist in our group, we all share the same faith. We don't have we're very similar to any of the trad groups in the sense we want all the doctrinal councils, we want the restoration of the papacy, we want the restoration of the Catholic social order. And we don't, so any of these political things or church canon law squabbles or turf wars, we don't care. We don't care. There are some people that want to make that are from that old Catholic line or old Roman Catholic line that want to make it its own distinct church or some sort of Protestant sect. That's not us at all. We believe that we're a portion of the one true church that Christ founded, and that our role in the 21st century is to aid the restoration so that we are all under one Catholic Peter. So how is that different from any other trad group? And so that's the thing. And unfortunately, no one owns the name Catholic or Old Catholic or Old Roman Catholic. So, if someone wanted to, if a Baptist minister decided he was going to wear antlers and call himself Catholic, there's really nothing the local diocese can do about it. And likewise, we've got people that use our name that do not believe as we do. So, we've had discussions about, well, what do we do? Do we call these people out? Do we freaking know? So generally we just say, listen, I don't know who these guys are you're listening to or who you're trying to splatter with us, but all we know is 20 doctrinal councils, Catholic moral praxis, want restoration under a Catholic Peter. So that's what every trad group wants.
Good evening, Your Grace and Father. My question is, in so many instances, the ape of the church, the synodal church, is easy to identify and avoid. Why are so many people easily convinced of Vatican II? Your Excellency?
Catholic moral praxis, primarily. There were people dancing in the streets in the 60s that they didn't have to be weird in the world's eyes anymore. So what basically Vatican II did, theologically, it sort of said, Protestants, you were right for the last 500 years. We're just going to adapt to be like you. But even more dark in some senses was the idea that Catholics could now just be children of the world. And a lot of people, much more people than we would have ever thought, decided that was a great idea. I'll tell you a story. I was at a Knights of Columbus meeting, my last one, and I'm pro Knights. I'm not anti Knights of Columbus, but this particular council that I was at, I went to talk about liturgical dance because it was an embarrassing incident where some immodest display was shown, and I was complimenting the Knights of Columbus Honor Guard for a bunch of the knights walked out at this horrible display. And so I got up there and I was just complimenting them. And you know what happened? There was a whole bunch of people that got up and condemned me for bringing it to everyone's attention, because they said, how dare you, I mean, this was a really disgusting display. I'm not a prudish guy. I'm an ex-sailor. But I'll tell you this right now, that was a totally scandalous display in this particular dance in the modest costumes. And yet people were more upset that I would dare, oh, you might insulted my granddaughter, versus you allowed your granddaughter to be effectively prostituted in the temple of God around the Blessed Sacrament. What's wrong with you? Where's your fear of God? So I think people have, Paul VI, he laid down the tiara in 1965, and then he went off to the UN, and you can get this on the Vatican website. You can look this up. Look up Paul VI's address to the UN, and he called the UN the world's greatest hope. And I think there was just a lot of people that didn't want all the rules and the burden of what was expected of a devout Catholic, and they instead chose to be a child of the world. But because they were Catholic, of the Catholic family, they wanted to still have the trappings and all of the things they found easy and comforting, but none of the cross. So that's not really an old temptation. In the last 2,000 years, we've always had people that, like, look at ancient Rome, where the Christians were persecuted and fed to lions. There were a group of Christians that would go to Mass on Sunday, and then on Monday, they would pinch a little incense to Jupiter. Oh, it's just a little incense to Jupiter. Who will know? Well, God knows. So I don't know if that answers your question, whether I rabbit holed it on you, but I think that's how I see it. How about you, Father?
I always go back to the same thing, Your Excellency. I know you've heard me say this many times. I think it comes down to mommy and daddy issues.
Right.
Mommy and daddy issues. Many people, like the homosexual, need, because their parents didn't pay enough attention to them, they need to feel a part of this major group. They need to feel like they belong.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever they find that group within the church, because on paper they're in communion, and they get their little group of friends that all need the same thing. They all have mommy daddy issues, and they all want to just affirm each other in that, yeah, we're accepted by this very large, incredible institution where we belong to something great, something incredible. The approval the church gives us by accepting us to being in communion, that's like the best badge I could possibly wear, to say, I'm accepted and I'm important and I matter, and all these sorts of things. And so it's very hard for them to detach from that approval, that recognition from an institution, because otherwise, I mean, here's the reality. If you truly have, I mean, maybe some of you, I'm sure, know this. If you grew up with a loving father and loving mother, if at 18 years old, and by the time you're become an adult, are leaving your house to go off into the world and to be an adult, if you know that you're loved, like truly loved, if you know that you're loved, it doesn't matter if anybody else in the entire world loves you. It doesn't matter if anybody else in the entire world loves you, because you know you're loved. And that gives you the freedom to stand for the truth, even if the whole world hates you for it, because you know that you are loved. You know that you were loved. And so I think that's what a lot of people are lacking. And so because their mother and father didn't love them, they have to seek that love elsewhere. And a large, credible institution is kind of a replacement for lack of a mom and a dad.
You're going on about being loved, and then my cat gives me a little kiss in the ear. There you go.
He's doing something very unholy behind you, I'm sure.
You think? Be good, cat. But yeah, it strikes me too. Those who follow us on Twitter, if you look at our critics, it's very interesting, because when people don't attack idea, but they attack us personally, they often betray what they themselves, find like they wouldn't want to be called themselves. And a lot of these issues that the father mentions about a loving mother or father, they sort of come out, and there was one guy that, for example, he says, oh, you just crave my recognition. And it's like, we don't even know you. We don't, I mean, no offense. I hope we're friends in heaven, but we don't really care whether you recognize us or not. But then the thought was, well, maybe this person craves recognition. What recognition is being denied them that they consider this such a such a wound or potential wound. I mean, if you don't agree with this, just block us, just move along. I mean, if what we say is not of spiritual benefit or what have you, but someone that takes the time to attack us as people, it really is interesting. What is going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's like, okay, so in trying to find a group to join, I mean, I tried many Nova Scotia dioceses to try to erect as a public association the faithful, the Oblates of St. Augustine, together with Father John. We knew how this would go. We knew we were going to get rejected by everybody. We examined the list. I mean, we can go SSPX, we can go SSPX Resistance, we can go maybe Sedevacantes, this and that, Sedevacantes Bishop. Father John knew lots of people. He was very well connected. Obviously, if we wanted status, if we wanted a big name to belong to, of course we would have approached the SSPX. We never did. Why? The name, the status, the affiliation of an institution that's already credible, all that kind of stuff, it matters nothing to us. What matters is the mission. What matters is our existence, that there will be people that will take care of us, that will give us what we need, and let us do what we were founded to do, which is be traditional Augustinians, and no one to encroach on this. So the fact that I chose, the Caer-Glow in one sense shows that I don't care about status and name and all these sorts of things. But many people will say, "Oh, I would have joined the SSPX." Why? Because they're credible. They have all this credibility. Like, that's exactly what they want to attach themselves to. Exactly what they want to attach themselves to. So yeah.
And Father, and I will say, this is not critique of the SSPX. This is an example.
No. Yeah,
we support them very much. But what we're saying is, like, for example, can you imagine if I was an SSPX bishop? I couldn't say the stuff I say. Right? And so I
would sign agreements with Rome. So yeah, no.
Right. And I well, exactly. There would be I wouldn't make any agreement with Rome, not unless they're going to restore the Roman right. So, so the thing is that, and I'm not condemning any group for their decisions. I'm just saying that that's why we didn't fit in. It's not that these guys aren't good. It's just that, jeepers, I couldn't live my priesthood. Father couldn't live his priesthood congruently with who we are and what God has given us as attributes for the service of the church. We needed a structure that allowed for that. Father Martin never has to worry about me. Not, he's not a heretic, right? So that's my rule of all my clergy. Just don't be a heretic, and I will back you whatever you got to do.
It's a low bar.
But I'll tell you, most groups would be calling up. I had a vicar general of a Nova Scotia diocese call me about Father Martin one time. See, I'm going to tell you, Father. And he said, "You got to rein in that Martin on Twitter." And I laughed. I said, "What?" I said, we all aspire to be Father Martin on Twitter. No, I'm joking a bit, but what I'm getting at is that, people are tired of the BS. And I think most of you guys would rather that we say something a little politically incorrect, or maybe we could have phrased it better. But that what you get, if you come and visit us in our living room, you get what you see here. We don't have these schemes and backroom deals and playing off for benefactors' favor. I had lost for one of my parishes over a third of our revenue, and God blessed us and gave it all back within a month. But we lost a third of our revenue because a benefactor tried to exert control using money, and none of my clergy can be bought. I hope that's always the case, because it's a bold thing to say. And of course, you certainly just say, the devil's going to tempt people. But no, I'm just so proud of these guys that we have a group of people that love God, and we understand the stakes of the world, and no 30 pieces of silver or various agreements that we could get to try to make us more credible in front of benefactors. None of that matters soon. I mean, the world could wrap up tomorrow. Our time could be over tomorrow. We might not wake to see the next day. So what are we doing for God? Why would we worry about a 30 pieces of silver or earthly credibility? What does that exactly give us, right?
Absolutely. See anything else here? Good. Oh. Well, professional e-Catholics will always oppose traditionalism because it wouldn't allow them to make revenue off the faith. There are also professional e-Catholics that are traditional because they can make revenue on the faith. Here's the thing. Unfortunately, the trad movement has been hijacked by laity, by podcasters, and now the podcasters, the lay people are gatekeepers of which traditional group is okay and not. Like,
Right.
what? But this is a clown world. This is an absolute clown world, where even lay people. Maybe I have some friends that are associated with these e-Catholic trads, these e-trads, that can't really publicly even come out as a buddy with me, because then his livelihood is at risk.
Right.
Because he does, so it's that bad also with trads. It's that bad also with trads. Yes, the podcasters are a problem. The podcasters are a major problem. Ecclesiastical news, ecclesiastical drama.
Yeah.
It's a clickbait. It appeals to people's emotions. So here's the thing. Father Ripperger talks about pop music and why pop music is bad. He says pop music is bad because it appeals to emotions, the irrational appetites to arouse the passions. Pop music is bad because it arouses the passions. Now, what does ecclesiastical news do? Does that pertain to any of your guys' lives in a particular sense? If Bishop Elegante says this, I mean, he's not anybody's bishop. He's an emeritus. Who cares what he says? He's irrelevant. By the fact that he's emeritus, he's technically irrelevant. So who cares? But the news has to promote this. The podcast have to promote all these things that you just simply don't need to know, but that and then it rouses your passions. Like, oh, I'm against this guy now, or oh, I'm for this guy now. I'm going to use this as an arguments. All it does is arouse passions. That's what the podcasters are actually doing, just arousing passions with ecclesiastical news, drama, clickbait, these sorts of things. Which is why our goal here at Restless Heart Media is actually to focus more on spiritual theology, spiritual things that are edifying, which is why we don't care to have 2,000 clicks. We want 200 clicks, maybe 200 views. The people that are constantly returning because they want to grow in holiness. Like we have our Tuesday night series. Of course, here, we wanted an opportunity on Friday nights to engage live chat with all your questions. Because, we want to talk about what you want us to talk about. Post sermons, on my first Saturday meditations. And I mean, also the problem is I'm actually in charge of a parish. So like I have limited time to make content, right? Especially if I'm getting donations here and there and just a stipend from the parish. So limited time. So I can't go live with every piece of breaking news that a layperson can, because I also have to pray 4 hours a day. I have to pray. So we're limited in that aspect, but for sure, lay podcasters, like I can constantly go on because, and they literally take authority away from clergy, trad clergy.
Well, there's a spectrum too. I think we'd agree that there are some that are, just present basically church news, but there are others that function as gatekeepers, and that they determine Catholicity of other people. So they don't have the authority to do that. And then they also basically, like some of these folks, like you don't know which authority they're subject to. They claim to be Catholic. Well, what bishop are you under then? Right.
Yeah. And, they're trying to use the internet and the Catholic faith to make 6 figures to raise a family. Meanwhile, we gave up everything to do this, and somehow we're less credible than those who can spend all time trying to create content. So that's just kind of the bizarre world we live in, and people eat it up. People love the daily live stream. So thank you, Mark. We're here for people like you who want to grow in holiness, want to keep coming back, want to better themselves, want to get to heaven. We don't care for those who want a commentary on the latest letter by Archbishop Vigano. What he recently said. I don't even know what he recently said. I don't pay attention anymore. I really just don't care for news. So
I'm a little more in the news than the father, but I have to agree with him. It's a distraction more than a help in a lot of cases. I try to curate it for my flock so that, basically the ones that find the news painful and stressful, I can sort of pass along what is important to know, because, a lot of our flock their grandchildren are sucked into this, so it's important for them to know a little bit about what's going on. But, it's such a slippery slope. And I'm a big fan of a number of Catholic lay work as well. I'm just saying that the as a group, they're a problem though. As a group, but it's the exceptions that prove the rule. And yeah, so I'm a big fan of return to tradition, for example. And but there's and there are other podcasts that aren't so bad, but there are also some that function very much as what I rail against with this McReligion thing. It's just a therapeutic comfort food for people that want to think they're better than other people. It's just it's not helpful for the progress of a soul.
We have 100 people tuning in tonight across platforms. This has been Friday Night Leisure, where we come and engage in the chat with you guys here on Restless Heart Media. We resume with our normal programming on Tuesday with Story of the Soul. Alberto and I will be talking about the next chapter in St. Teresa's autobiography, Story of the Soul. Thank you so much to His Excellency Archbishop Miko for filling in for Alberto while Alberto was at a baseball game. Alberto was at a baseball game. That was more important. Baseball game. Anyway, thanks, Your Excellency, for filling in for Alberto. See you guys on Tuesday. God bless.
God bless you.
Let's see if this video works.